Star Wars Rebellion is a fantastic game, and I'm excited you're thinking about playing it or maybe just need a refresher after some time away. Here's how to play the game. We'll be including the Rise of the Empire expansion in this setup and how to play video. If you have Rebellion and you don't have the expansion, you're really missing out. It truly brings the game to a whole new level, especially with how engaging the combat can be.
I'm looking forward to completing your training.
Okay, we've got to get the game set up before anyone can inspire the galaxy to rise up against fascism or before anyone can extinguish hope from the galaxy. I'm going to teach you what I consider to be the best setup rules. This will be sort of a mix of the first game setup mixed with advanced setup and new rules from the expansion. I found this makes for the most balanced game. But feel free to mix everything up later on after you've played the game a bunch. First thing, throw the board down on the table. It's a big board and you'll need a lot of space around it, so if your table is smaller than 4 feet by 3 feet, as mine is, you might run into some space issues. Place the faction sheets on either side of the board. The Empire faction sheet should be placed next to Coruscant and the Rebel one on the opposite side of the board. Then place the two small faction sheets from the expansion below these. Next, place each faction's starting leaders in their respective leader pools. The leader pool is where your leaders get to hang out when they're not doing cool space stuff. Starting leaders are leaders that do not have the recruit icon, which looks like a little medal from the end of A New Hope. The Empire's starting leaders are Palpatine, Tarkin, Vader, and Taj. The Rebels' starting leaders are Dodonna, Mothma, Leia, and Riken. Place the rest of the leaders within reach of their respective factions. You might need to recruit them later. Now we prepare the time track. This is the clock that is ticking down towards Rebel victory. Place the time marker on space 1 and the Rebel reputation marker on space 14. If these two tokens ever occupy the same space, the Rebels win, but we'll get to that more later. Separate the objective cards by the numbers on their backs, 1, 2, and 3. Set aside 1 Death Star plans in the 3 stack, and then randomly select 4 other 3 cards to add to it. Shuffle them all together and then place those face down. Then find your Death Star plans in the 2 cards and randomly select 4 other 2 cards to add to it. Shuffle these and place them face down on top of the 3 cards. Then randomly select and shuffle 5 1 cards and place them on top of the 2 deck. Then you can place this whole stack on the objective card space of the board. This is the objective deck and will be how the Rebel player will be gaining reputation and therefore winning. The Rebel player then draws 1 objective card and keeps it hidden from the Imperial player. Next, take each faction's action deck. These are the little decks with the Falcon and TIE Fighter cockpits on them. Remove all cards from the decks that lack the recruit icon on their card backs. Each player gets 2 random action cards without the recruit icon. The rest of the action cards without the recruit icons are returned to the game box and won't be used this game. Then shuffle the action cards that do have the faction icons and place them in the action deck slot next to each faction sheet. These cards are how you'll recruit new leaders as well as pull off some unexpected plays during the game. Give the Rebel player the Rebel Advanced Tactic cards, 1 set for ground combat and 1 set for space combat, and give the Imperial player the Imperial Advanced Tactic cards. The tactic decks from the base game can be returned to the box and won't be used in the game. Put each player's loyalty markers within reach of that player. The rest of the tokens and dice can be set to the side of the board within reach of both players. Let's prepare the mission decks now. During this step you have 2 options. You can use the mission set from the base game, or you can use the mission set from Rise of the Empire expansion. Both are cool and simply offer different flavors. Both are worth experiencing. The process for preparing mission decks will be identical for both factions, with 1 additional step for the Imperial player. Locate the 4 starting mission cards, which can be identified by this little arrow on the bottom of the card. Note, for the Rebel player, the Sabotage card was replaced in the expansion, so be sure to use the Sabotage card that references a shield bunker and return the other one to the game box. Then separate the mission deck into 3 piles. 1 stack should be every card that features the faces of leaders on the upper left corner. then a stack of missions that have the Darth Vader icon on them, then a stack of cards that do not have the Vader icon on them. For the Imperial player, you'll need to separate out one more type of card, project cards. This is every card with a little star in the bottom right corner. All of these cards should be shuffled and placed on the project space on the game board. Now you must choose the original mission set without the Vader icon, or the Rise of the Empire mission set, which features the Vader icon. This choice must be the same for both the Rebel and the Imperial player. Once you've selected your preferred mission set, choose the unchosen set to the game box, then shuffle all the mission cards with leader faces in with the mission set you chose. The cards with the leader faces are always used no matter which mission set you choose. Place each faction's mission deck on the mission slot next to their faction sheets. We're almost done with setup. You're doing great. We're going to place starting units and loyalty now. I like to use the starting planets from the Learn to Play book as they feel most balanced. Just know if you want to play with different starting planets, there are rules for that in the advanced rules section of the Learn to Play book. Though we're only going to use these planets for starting loyalty. For starting units, we're going to refer to the Rise of the Empire expansion. Place a Rebel loyalty marker on Kashyyyk, Bathory, and Naboo. Place Imperial loyalty markers on Seleucami, Corellia, and Mustafar. Place subjugation markers on Mandalore and Sullust. Remove Seleucami, Mandalore, Corellia, Sullust, and Mustafar from the probe deck. These cards can be returned to the game box, and the Imperial player can be assured that the Rebel base is on none of these planets. The Imperial player places one Death Star on Space 3 of their build queue. Then the Imperial player picks a remote system and places 4 TIE Fighters, 1 Stormtrooper, and 1 Death Star under construction in that system. Remote systems are systems that don't have a loyalty slot or build icons, so Dantooine, Dagobah, Endor, etc. Then remove the chosen systems card from the probe deck. Then the Imperial player gets the following units: 8 TIE Fighters, 3 Assault Carriers, 3 Star Destroyers, 2 TIE Strikers, 12 Stormtroopers, 4 AT-STs, 2 Assault Tanks, and 1 AT-AT. They place them in any systems that have either an Imperial loyalty marker or subjugation marker or a Death Star under construction. At least one ground unit must be in each Imperial system. The Rebel player gets 1 X-Wing, 1 Y-Wing, 1 U-Wing, 1 Rebel Transport, 1 Corellian Corvette, 5 Rebel Troopers, 2 Airspeeders, and 1 Rebel Vanguard. They can place these units on the Rebel base space and or any one Rebel or neutral system. The Rebel player then takes the probe deck and secretly chooses the location of the hidden Rebel base. If this is your first game, you should really not choose a system that's adjacent to any Imperial units. Otherwise, they're going to find you really fast and wipe you out. The Rebel player puts this card face down under the Rebel base space of the game board. The probe deck is then shuffled and placed on the probe deck space on the game board. Then each player draws 2 mission cards to add to their 4 starting mission cards. And remember, the Rebel player should have already drawn 1 objective card. Now you're ready to face off for the fate of the galaxy far, far away. Let's learn how to play now.
Look, don't worry. Everything's gonna be fine. Trust me.
A round of Star Wars Rebellion is comprised of 3 phases. The assignment phase, where you assign your leaders to missions. The command phase, where your leaders run around and attempt to complete missions, attempt to prevent leaders from completing missions, or move units around which could result in combat. And then finally the refresh phase, where lots of important stuff happens.
From now on, you do as I tell you, okay?
The assignment phase begins with the Rebel player assigning one of their leaders to a mission from their hand of mission cards. They do this by placing the chosen mission card face down in their play area and placing 1 or 2 leaders from their leader pool on that card. All missions have skill requirements shown in the upper left-hand corner. What this means is that the leader or leaders assigned to that mission must have at least that many matching skill icons in order to be assigned to that mission. The more matching icons a leader has, the more likely they are to succeed at that mission. For example, Message from High Command requires a minimum of 3 diplomacy skill icons, so Palpatine could be assigned to this mission all by himself. Or you could put Tarkin and Vader together on this mission, as their combined skill icons would still meet the requirement. You could also just put Vader and Palpatine on it if you really want to make sure it succeeds. After the Rebel player assigns a leader to a mission, then the Imperial player does the same, and players take turns in this manner until both players pass. Players can choose to leave leaders in their leader pool, and this is in fact crucial as leaders still in the leader pool during the command phase can contest enemy missions and move your units around the galaxy. Let's take a closer look at the skill icons on leaders before moving on to the command phase. There are 4 skill icons leaders can have: Diplomacy, Intel, Spec Ops, and Logistics. Diplomacy missions tend to provide loyalty in systems or get players more units. Intel missions typically help the rebels get objective cards and help the Imperial player locate the rebel base. Spec Op missions typically help destroy Imperial units or capture rebel leaders. Logistics missions are how the Imperial player accesses project cards and how the rebel player can move units in and out of the rebel base.
And now, Your Highness, we will discuss the location of your hidden rebel base.
This is where the meat of the game is. Starting with the rebel player, players take turns doing one of 2 things. You can either reveal a mission or activate a system. A player may choose to pass at any time, neglecting to activate a system nor reveal a mission. After a player passes, their turn is passed for the rest of the command phase. After both players pass, the command phase ends. To activate a system, you take one leader from your leader pool and place it in any system. This leader must have tactics values in order to do this, the little numbers on the bottom of the leader standee. So for example, Boba Fett could not be used to activate a system. Then you can move any of your units from adjacent systems into the activated system, though you cannot cross these extra thick boundaries. These lines are impassable. Units may not be moved out of a system containing a non-captured leader. Think of them like a big black hole that sucks everything in, or maybe your units are just extra clingy and are unwilling to leave a system where they have a leader they like. When moving units, ground units, and also TIE fighters need to be transported. Units that can be transported have this little symbol. Structures cannot be transported and can never move. Units that can transport have this number that says how many units can be transported. If there's not a ship available to transport a unit, that unit can't move. After moving units, a few things might happen. If there are enemy units in that system, you'll resolve a combat with your opponent, which we'll cover later. If you're the Imperial player and you get ground units in that system, 2 things happen. Place a subjugation marker on that system, then the rebel player must tell you whether or not that system contains the rebel base. So that's activating a system. Now let's look at revealing a mission. When you reveal a mission, take one of your face-down mission cards that you assigned a leader to and reveal it. All missions will either tell you to attempt it or resolve it. If a mission uses the word resolve, you simply follow the instructions and that's it. If they say attempt, this means your opponent has the opportunity to oppose the mission. Missions also give you restrictions on where your leader must go in order to resolve or attempt the mission, such as a system with an Imperial unit or a rebel system, etc. Place the leader assigned to the mission in a system that meets the mission's requirements. Note, if a leader attempts or resolves a mission in the rebel base space, be sure to put them in the rebel base space and not the system the rebel base is located in. Keep it secret. Important! After you do a starting mission, that mission returns to your hand. All other missions go into a discard pile after use. If your opponent cannot, or declines, to oppose an attempt mission, the mission just succeeds. So let's see what happens if a mission is opposed. When a player sends a leader on a mission, their opponent may take one of their leaders from their leader pool and place it in the same system as the leader attempting to complete the mission. The only requirement for this is that the opposing leader must have at least one skill icon that matches the mission's required skill. Then each player rolls dice equal to the number of matching skill icons their leader has. You can use either the black or the red dice. There's no difference when it comes to these skill checks. The difference will only matter in combat. If your leader has the minor skill, aka the little bitty skill icon, you get to roll a green die for each of those. Each hit you roll counts as one success. Each direct hit you roll counts as 1 success. Each crossed sabers you roll counts as 2 successes. These symbols function differently during combat. And note, there's a handy dice reference chart on the back of the Learn to Play booklet, which will be helpful for your first time playing. The player attempting the mission needs to have more successes than the player opposing the mission. In other words, the player opposing the mission will win ties. If the player attempting the mission fails, the outcome of the mission is not resolved. All leaders remain in those systems. Note! If you're attempting a mission and the leader attempting that mission is featured on the mission card, you automatically get 2 successes to your dice results. Though any leader can attempt these missions, the pictured leader will obviously have better odds at succeeding at it.
Where is the rebel base?
Once both players pass during the command phase, we move into the refresh phase. During the refresh stage, always follow these steps and be sure to refer to the back of the Learn to Play booklet for an easy reference. I play this game all the time and I still look at it to remember these steps. First, all leaders return to the leader pool. Any leaders still assigned to face down missions will return to the pool as well, and those mission cards will return to their player's hand. Any leaders who have been captured or frozen in carbonite don't return to the leader pool. Next, each player draws 2 mission cards. If they have more than 10 mission cards in their hand, they must discard until they have 10. Then the rebel player draws 1 objective card. The Imperial player draws 2 cards from the probe deck. Remember, these cards are showing you systems where the rebel base is not located. Keep these secret so the rebel player doesn't know what you know. Next, advance the time marker on the time track. If the time marker has moved onto a space with the recruit icon, this is the first 4 turns of the game, both players draw the top 2 cards from their action decks. They keep one of these cards and discard the other to the bottom of their action deck. They then take a leader featured on the chosen card and place them in the leader pool. This action card can go with your other action cards. We'll talk more about action cards later. Next, if the time marker moved onto a space with a build icon, for each loyal and subjugated system, each player takes units that match the resource icons of that system and place them on their build queue in the number that matches the number in the system. For example, if we look at Corellia, the Imperial player can take 1 blue square unit and 1 blue triangle unit from their supply. They then place these on space 3 of the build queue. The Rebel player has loyalty on Bothawi. They can take an airspeeder or Golan arms turret and place it on space 1 of their build queue. If your system has a sabotage marker or enemy units in it, it can't build anything for you. Don't forget, the Rebel base space generates units for the Rebel player. Attention Imperial player! If a system is subjugated, they apparently don't like you very much and don't produce as much for your war effort. In subjugated systems, you may only use the leftmost resource icon when building units. Next, and note this step happens whether or not there was a build icon on the time track, both players deploy units, starting with the Rebel player. To deploy units, first, slide all units on the build queue down 1 space. Any units that slide off the build queue may then be deployed. Players can deploy a maximum of 2 units per system during this phase. Units can only be deployed in a system where you have loyalty, subjugation, or a shield bunker. Units cannot be deployed into a system containing enemy units. After this is done, it's time to go back to the assignment phase. Okay, at this point, there's only a few things left you need to know before you know how to play the game. How to win, combat, and action cards. Let's start with the action cards. These cards can be played at various times during the game, usually denoted in bold at the top of the card. If they are assignment or combat, they can only be played in conjunction with the leader featured on the card.
You can't win, Darth.
The Imperial player wins if they locate the Rebel base and then manage to destroy all Rebel units in that system and have at least 1 Imperial unit in the system. If the Imperial player ever has loyalty or a ground unit in the system containing the Rebel base, the Rebel player must announce that the Imperial player has found the Rebel base. When this happens, flip the base's probe card face up and move any leaders and units from the Rebel base space to that system. Combat immediately occurs if there are Imperial units there, which we'll get to soon, I promise. The Rebel player wins the game if the reputation marker and the time marker ever share the same space on the time track. This basically represents the rebellion gaining enough support and sympathy throughout the galaxy to really start the decline of the Empire going in full force. You can move the Rebel reputation marker with the Rebel objective cards. The Rebel player simply plays an objective card at the time designated on the card, if they've met its conditions. Only one objective card may be played during each combat, and only one objective card may be played during each refresh phase. Okay, let's finally get to combat. And as a reminder, this is the cinematic combat rules introduced in the Rise of the Empire expansion, which is immensely superior to the original combat rules in the base game. When units move into a system containing enemy units, combat happens. The player who activated the system, aka the one who moved their units into the system, is the active player. If a player doesn't have a leader with tactic values in the system, they can take one from their leader pool and place it into the combat system if they want. This is optional. Feel free to leave your troops out to dry. Then players resolve space combat if there are units from both sides in space. Then they resolve ground combat if there are units from both sides on the ground. And repeat until the combat is over. So, before each space combat and each ground combat, players select one of their advanced tactics cards. These cards are never shuffled, and you have full access to all of them, except for the ones in your discard pile. Before each round of combat, each player selects a card from the deck matching the appropriate theater, space deck for space combat and ground deck for ground combat, and places it face down. Both players reveal their cards simultaneously. Starting with the active player, that player may resolve either the top ability on the card or the bottom ability. If the ability is preceded by a unit icon, you can only use that ability if that unit is present in the combat system. After these advanced tactic cards are played, they're placed into discard piles. These piles are not shuffled back into the decks. The only way to get cards back from your discard pile is to go through your entire deck of advanced tactic cards, or from in-game abilities that instruct you to draw a tactics card. When instructed to draw a tactics card, you may draw that many cards from your discard pile. This ability makes the shield generator for the rebels particularly powerful. Next, we roll dice. For each unit in the combat, find the matching dice from the faction sheet. The active player rolls their dice first. Then, they may choose to re-roll dice. A leader's tactic values shows you how many dice you may re-roll in each theater, blue for space and orange for ground. Each die may only be re-rolled once per attack, so if you have multiple leaders in the system, simply choose the highest tactics value present and use that number. So the most dice you'll ever be able to re-roll at once is 3. Hits can only be assigned to enemy units whose health, seen here on the faction sheet, is of a matching color. So a black hit can only hurt units with black health, and a red hit can only hurt units with red health. A direct hit can be assigned to any unit regardless of color. Note, the green dice only feature direct hits. The special icon, or crossed sabers, can be spent to remove a damage from one of your units whose health value is the same color as the die. When assigning damage to units, you can place the damage markers under them as they're not removed from the board until the end of the combat round. So if you're going second, any of your damaged guys will still get to roll dice before they're dead. Then the next player gathers their dice and rolls them, may choose to re-roll them, and then assigns the dice results. After assigning the dice results, all units that still have damage markers that equal or exceed their health value are destroyed. They're returned to the supply. Then you repeat these steps for the ground theater, each player secretly selecting and revealing a ground tactics card, then taking turns rolling, re-rolling, and assigning dice. After one round of space combat and one round of ground combat, starting with the active player, each player has the opportunity to retreat from the system. You can only retreat if you have a leader in the combat, but not if there's a Death Star in the combat. You move that leader to any adjacent or loyal system, or a system that contains friendly units. Normal movement and transport rules apply. Combat then ends. Unless you couldn't retreat everybody because you didn't have enough transports, then those guys got to keep fighting. If neither player chooses to retreat, then you begin another round. Combat ends when one side retreats or all of a side has been destroyed. Note that if there are no opposing units in one theater, just skip that step during combat. For example, if there's no units in space, but there are units on the ground, you skip the space combat round. If the only enemy units in combat are structures, and the enemy did not roll dice during the previous round of combat, those structures are immediately destroyed. This is, I think, just a rule to prevent you from just having to take turns killing something that can't shoot back.
Oh, I don't even know what I'm doing here. We're wasting our time.
Here's just a few other things to know. When a system gains or loses loyalty, if it's neutral, it gets your token. If it's loyal to the enemy, you simply remove their token rather than getting your own. There are a number of rings and markers, various objectives, and mission cards will instruct you when and where to use these markers during play, as these offer various effects. The most common ring will be the captured ring, which is used when the Imperial player captures an enemy leader. A captured leader does not return to the leader pool during the refresh phase. Cannot oppose missions, except ones attempted against the captured leader, and may be moved around by the Imperial player as if they were a ground unit. When you place a Sabotage Marker, simply place it over the effective system's resource icons. Be sure to keep the back of the Learn to Play booklet handy for easy reference to the refresh phase. Any other little minutia that comes up during play can be found in the rules reference booklet or the expansion rule sheet. And finally, if you get the Super Laser Online project card as the Empire and use it to destroy a planet, place a destroyed system token over that planet. All ground units in that system are destroyed. If the Rebel base was there, the Empire immediately wins. Units can move through this space, but ground units can't be placed on that system. The only way to destroy a Death Star is with the Death Star Plans objective card. Thanks for watching. I hope you love this game as much as I do. I hope this was clear. I hope I helped you learn how to play. And that's how to play!